All right, everybody. Again, my name is Matt Smith. I'm the superintendent of schools. Thanks for your patience. For those of you that just jumped on, we were waiting for others to join. We have over 250 people on this Zoom call, and I appreciate your patience as we let people into the room. I know that this is a little out of the ordinary, and we're doing our best. We had our first one earlier today, so appreciate your patience and your willingness to join us in this conversation. I'm going to be sharing a few slides with you. We're going to exchange some ideas in a thought exchange and then have some dialogue today about a few topics. So the purpose of today's meeting is to engage parents in providing feedback as key stakeholders for us here in Belton ISD. And what I mean by that is this is not just Q&A time where we have everybody be able to say, here's what's on my mind, what's the answer to the question. We're actually asking for your input and your feedback before we announce our final plan. And we'll get to this timeline of when that final plan announcement's coming in just a minute. But the whole purpose today is to actually engage our community as thought partners in our planning for the 2020-21 school year for our kids. Here's what we know. There's been a lot of change and a lot of things shifting, but what we do want to make sure is that we're providing exceptional experiences for every kid in Belton ISD. And we know that by engaging you as thought partners in it, we're going to be better at the beginning of the year. So that's the purpose of our time today. About today's event, a couple of things. First of all, we do anticipate having over, well, I think our capacity is set at 300 for the Zoom license that we have. If you have friends that are not able to get into this, please make sure that they know this is also being streamed on YouTube so that they can watch this along the way. It's not our goal to limit people to this. We actually wanted to open it up, but our Zoom licensing is what doesn't allow us to have more than 300. So it will be live streamed on Facebook so they can see that. Or excuse me, on YouTube, I apologize. Secondly, everyone is muted right now, and please make sure that if you unmute yourself later, I don't know what the limits are for everyone. If you unmute yourself later on accident, please make sure you mute yourself again, because what we end up having with 200 plus people on, we end up having a lot of background talk, and that doesn't serve us too well for an event like this. There's also a raise your hand feature in Zoom. It's a little icon that you can click on. I think it's in the dialogue or the chat section, and you can actually raise your hand. And what that does is it puts your hand up in the corner so that we know you have something to say. We will get to some dialogue portions about all of this when we get through the thought exchange and the sharing ideas, but that feature might be useful for you to use when we get to that point. A couple of things real quickly for background before we dive into stuff today is on July the 15th, I had a board work session with our trustees. And in that work session, we dove into talking about COVID-19 and what our response was for Belton ISD. At that time, we had certain things that we had to follow. Those things are guidelines from TEA. TEA is the Texas Education Agency, and TEA's guidelines as of July the 15th said that we didn't have a limit on the number of students in a classroom. We didn't have a limit on the number of students on the bus. We had to provide an at-home learning choice for all parents, and we had to provide a 5-day-a-week face-to-face instruction choice for all parents to consider. So we knew that we had two options that we had to provide for all families in Belton ISD at that point. And we also knew that the safety guidance was exactly that. They didn't provide restrictions for us. They just said, hey, yes, we want to keep everybody safe, but you don't have any kind of limits on class size or any kind of limits on bus capacity. The other thing that they didn't allow us to do, though, with that guidance is to create any kind of systems where we could actually social distance. So imagine if 100% of the parents in Belton ISD said they wanted to send their kids face-to-face, we wouldn't be able to actually keep 6 feet apart in any way, shape, or form if we had everybody attending school. And so their guidance at that point didn't allow us to actually talk about small groups of kids so that we could contact trace if they contracted COVID or to any kind of social distancing measures. That was as of July the 15th. We spent 3 hours with our trustees diving into plans, safety plans, mitigation strategies, how we're cleaning, how we're talking about instruction, all of those types of things. And that was as of last Wednesday. I'm going to fast forward because, as I said, things change kind of rapidly. And so on Friday, July the 17th, TEA changed their guidance for school districts at that point. And their changed guidance said that school districts actually have a little more flexibility and the ability to plan things out in a more thoughtful manner to ensure maybe more social distancing, maybe more ability to contact trace. That means that we did not actually have to provide 5 days a week face-to-face for any family that wanted it at that time. We could actually talk about having smaller groups of students in a phased-in approach, and we'll get into that in a little more depth in just a minute. They also clarified the ability for school districts to say, hey, at the beginning of the school year, if you need to take 4 weeks to transition to this new way of doing business in schools, you have the ability to do so. And in those 4 weeks, you might be able to bring 20% of your kids back the first week, and then 40%, and then 60%, et cetera. And so it was, school districts were given some flexibility on how they actually opened up the start of the school year for those first 4 weeks. They also gave an option that they hadn't had before, that if a school district needed it, the Board of Trustees could actually approve an additional 4 weeks for a phase-in process if needed. So they gave the school districts a little more authority and leniency on how to open up the school year as of Friday at 1 o'clock when we had that phone call with our commissioner. I left this piece of information on here. We were also expecting, as of yesterday, a UIL announcement. And that UIL announcement we were supposed to have yesterday, they didn't announce until today, but effectively they have postponed some of the athletic events for 5A and 6A school districts, the bigger school districts in the state of Texas, and pushed that timeline back a little bit. So UIL's announcement was expected on Monday the 20th, but we actually got that a little bit earlier today. Actually, when I was right in the middle of when I was hosting the first parent feedback session is when they got that announcement. So that's where we are right now with the updated information. I also presented to the Board of Trustees on Wednesday the 15th this timeline. And in this timeline, I want to be really clear about what our approach was and why it was this way. There were some districts that started to survey families in late June and tried to get a pulse on a situation in late June. We decided to hold off on all of that because we knew that the sands were shifting very rapidly and things changed very rapidly. And we wanted to make sure that our parents had a voice when the information was updated at the most important time. So July the 16th, we kicked off parent surveys, and hopefully you've all received information about those surveys. Our goal was to have an individual survey filled out for each student in our school district so that we knew from a parent perspective what was on your mind about that specific student. Those surveys are still open. As of last night, I believe we had 6,500 responses of the 12,200 students in Belton ISD. I anticipate today that probably went up even more, and we'll continue to gather that information. July 21st and 22nd, that's where we are right now, and we're having these community and staff feedback events. Again, this is about feedback from you and input from you. This is not about question and answer time, because as you see, we actually anticipate rolling out July 24th, our finalized plan. So we're engaging you as thought partners today, and what we really need to consider is the most important work from a parent perspective as we plan to reopen our schools. After these feedback sessions that we host today and tomorrow with community and staff, we're going to take this data that we gather through Thought Exchange and based on our dialogue today, and we have a design team that has been working on our planning process for the past month and a half. And that design team is going to get back together on Thursday, July 23rd to make finalized plans and recommendations for Belton ISD at that time. We anticipate the release of our comprehensive plan on July 24th. And I want to be really clear about this one with our community as well. When I say comprehensive plan released, I also shared with you that when I presented to the Board of Trustees on Wednesday the 15th, we used the guidance from TEA, and then it changed again on Friday the 17th. I just need our community to understand that we have various points of feedback that come into us and guidance that comes into us. If the governor says issues another executive order that says schools are closed, we have to follow those executive orders. If Bell County Health says that they have guidance for school districts on what they want to issue for our school districts. We have to follow those. If TEA changes their guidance once again, we have to follow that guidance. So July the 24th is our targeted date to issue that plan for Belton ISD, but please understand that with those other bodies, we might get additional guidance and we might have to alter that plan along the way. July 27th through August the 5th, our plan is to make sure that parents and families have the opportunity for an at-home learning registration window. And what that means is that at that time, after that comprehensive plan is released on July the 24th, parents will be able to say, I want to opt my kid into a at-home learning environment, meaning that's in a virtual world, or I want to make sure my student comes back face-to-face if these two options come to fruition. And so you'd have the details at that point to know what the virtual experience might look like and what the face-to-face experience might look like. And we want to give parents that opportunity to opt into that virtual world if they desire that. August 3rd through 18th, we will continue to make sure our community has the updates that we have along the way. As I said, things change rather rapidly, and we're doing our best to make sure you're informed as a community and you know where we stand. But we appreciate your participation today in helping us develop this finalized plan. So our tasks this week are exactly this. The graph that I showed you, or the picture I showed you a little bit earlier, said we were really focused on scenario 3 and scenario 5 when we talked about it on July 15th to the Board of Trustees. What I'm asking you all today to do is to engage in a thought exchange with me about some of these safety precautions that would be important to you as parents and family members if we come back face-to-face on August the 19th. And that is our plan. So we're going to dive into that, and we're going to use that dialogue and that feedback in the thought exchange to help us develop that finalized plan. And you see those tasks over on the right-hand side. I'm going to mention a couple of things real quickly before we get into the thought exchange, because I think this is something that's on everyone's mind. And I'm going to have Mike Morgan, one of our assistant superintendents, jump in and provide more clarity on some of this that I can't get into the depth on. But first of all, prevention and mitigation strategies. Everyone knows that we're in the middle of a pandemic and that there are certain things that are important to keep people safe. Right now, under the governor's orders, it says that people have to be wearing a mask if they're over 10 years of age. In Belton ISD, our plan is to make sure that students and staff are wearing masks when they're in our buildings. We know that that is a challenge. Totally understand. I'll share something personal with y'all. I have a daughter that is going to be a senior in high school in another district that has some significant special learning needs. I know that that's going to be a very major challenge for her with a mask. And so we're going to work to make sure that we educate and support and help students and staff along the way. But the goal is to have everyone wear a mask if they possibly can, because we want to keep people safe in the classrooms and in the learning environments in our school. Distancing, we have some guidelines on distancing that might help us out, and that might include things like moving some of the furniture out of classrooms that might not be needed so you have a little more space. It might be that we actually can talk about things like hybrid schedules, and we'll dive into that a little bit more in a few minutes, but that might mean limiting the number of students that your child comes in contact with during the day so that we keep our groups of students small and that we limit exposure to COVID-19. Last thing that I'll say is cleaning and sanitizing. We went through quite a few comprehensive things with our Board of Trustees on Wednesday the 15th, but cleaning and sanitizing we know is one of the key things that we can do and stress with our students to keep everyone in our schools buildings safe. The cleaning and sanitizing includes providing additional hand washing stations and including hand washing into routines in the school, particularly at our elementary age, so that they get used to doing that on a regular basis. It includes our custodial staff being able to actually provide a deep clean with the foggers that you see often, and being able to make sure that the surfaces are sanitized in the school. So there are many different ways that we can provide different cleaning and sanitizing options. Mr. Morgan, do you want to provide any more detail on this slide for me?
I'll say first and foremost that the concerns you have are our concerns too, and the concerns that as we've worked through this with our staff as well. I mean, we're in a position where we've been in several weeks of intense planning. We also have children in school. We also have a lot of us spouses that work in school and work in some of these businesses as well. What we will do, in addition to what Dr. Smith was just talking about, is we have a 14-point plan when it talks about an operational response for returning to school. And we feel like whenever we are able to reveal the details of our plan on Friday, that we can let you know as parents what to expect if you choose for your students to be at school learners, and for what you should expect if you choose for your students to be at home learners. But some of the topics that will be included in that plan that I know you have specific questions about is health screening. We're going to give a lot of information on that. Face coverings, hand washing and sanitizing expectations, hygiene education, transmission precautions, close contact, exclusion and readmittance criteria, which is basically what do these quarantine rules that we hear so much about in the media and in the news, what does that mean as far as to an educational climate? Campus clinics and health services, but basically our school nurses and what procedures and guidelines are they going to operate under? Campus visitors, what extra precautions are we going to take for campus visitors? Additional campus safety measures, and then obviously our school nutrition, custodial services, and transportation services. In hearing the feedback from this morning's group, we know concerns. We know there's concerns of masks and facial coverings. We know there's concerns of capacity and class sizes and bus capacity and all those sorts of things that go along with that. And from an operational standpoint, we know that there are concerns about screening and testing and those types of things. And we hope that we can answer all of those questions for you to the best of our ability in this changing climate, and let you know that we do have a plan that we're going to try to mitigate these dangers as much as we can. And we're going to try to keep those staff and students that are in a face-to-face environment as safe as possible. And whenever we need to handle things, we'll have a plan to handle things. So that there is going to be a response plan. And we hope that we can fill you in, or we can answer a lot of your questions on Friday whenever we release these details. But we do want to hear today what your concerns are, because there may be things that we need to address better in our plan, and we need to know what your concerns are so we can make sure those are addressed appropriately.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And so I'll go back just to frame before we dive into the thought exchange and start getting your ideas. What we're really talking about is, what are those safety measures that are on your minds as families? What are those things that I need to know, that my team needs to know as the superintendent, that are really important to you all as we decide these things? We've had a team that's been in place planning for each one of these scenarios, because we probably will have to figure that out along the way. And so today's about getting your voice in that planning process, and we're going to get that rolling at this point. Elizabeth and team, I'm going to have you turn it over and get the thought exchange going.
Yes, sir. We're ready. So Thought Exchange has been a tool that we've been using throughout this planning process, basically since Dr. Smith joined us this spring. It really helps us hear lots of different great feedback or input. And so right now what you'll see on your screen for those that are joining us through Zoom, we have a question for you that we'd like you to dive into answering. And there's several ways that you can gain access to this Thought Exchange. The question is, what is the primary safety concern or other factor that is guiding your current decision process to either select at home or at school learning for your student? And so how you can dive into this Thought Exchange and engage with us is either using this QR code that should be on your screen right now. So use your phone and highlight that QR code, and it should pop you right into our Thought Exchange. You can go to the web address tejoin.com and use this access code 690-181-190. Again, that's tejoin.com, access code 690-181-190. Or in the chat, you should see a link to be able to just click really easy and hop right into that Thought Exchange. Looks like you can, if you're viewing by Zoom with us, you can see that the participants are growing slowly but surely. For those of us on the that are joining us by phone, if you have the capability to pull up a web browser on a device near you, you can go to tejoin.com, type in the code 181-190 and join in this thought exchange. I'm going to go ahead and set the timer here. That's going to give us 6 minutes. What we would ask everyone to do is provide your initial thoughts to this question. What is the primary safety concern or other factor that is guiding your current decision process to either select at home or at school learning for your student? As you get into the thought exchange and are able to share your thoughts, be sure to click down in the little right-hand corner where you can go over and rate the thoughts shared by others. Viewing on the screen, you'll see that we've got 7 thoughts shared with 5 ratings. I'm going to sit back for a little while this timer ticks down and let you continue to get in and access this thought exchange, either by using the QR code on your screen right now, the link provided in the chat box, or again by navigating through a web browser to tejoin.com and use the access code 690-181-190. Just went under the 2-minute mark left as we encourage you to get into the thought exchange and share your thoughts around the question, what is the primary safety concern or other factor that is guiding your current decision process to either select at home or at school learning for your student? We're really hoping to collect as much parent feedback as we possibly can as we go into our next planning design work with our team. So please get into the thought exchange either by using the QR code, the link provided in the chat box, or going to tejoin.com using the number code 690-181-190 to answer this question. And once you've shared your thoughts, be sure to go back there and rate. We've got 226 participants who shared 193 thoughts. We got a big jump there, and have over 2,000 ratings. And what that looks like, I'm going to flip screens. Is this level of engagement in the cloud on the screen now of everyone sharing their feedback and ratings. Have about a minute longer. Dr. Smith, it looks like our timer has run out. We've got 231 participants who've shared 251 thoughts, and we're well over 3,000 ratings now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, team. And thank you, participants. As you can see on the screen, we, in that short amount of time right now, have 265 unique thoughts that were shared by participants and 3,298 ratings of those. So the power of a tool like this gives us the ability to make sure anyone who's on the call has the ability to share their unique thought to Belton ISD. We're going to talk through a few of the top things that have been rated so far here in the thought exchange. Elizabeth and team, I see a couple at the top there, the health of our children. If you put the health of our children as yours, will you please raise your hand on the Zoom chat box? And I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more before we start to talk a little bit about it. Again, if you were the person who submitted the health of our children as the most important thing for us to think about regarding safety, we will elaborate a little bit on it if you can identify who you are. Becca, Elizabeth, I can't see the people raising their hands. Can you make sure that?
The hand raising feature is down. It should be in your bar under reactions. I'm not scrolling through, but I'm not seeing any hands raised.
All right, so I'll talk a little bit about it. And if you raise your
I'm
hand.
sorry, my hand was raised.
Under participants. It's under participants.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.
So based on my screen, I'm still not able to see. Who said that you raised your hand? Tell me a little bit more about what you meant by the health of our children.
I want to make sure. I have a daughter who has asthma, so I'm concerned about if she was to contract the virus. I also put on there about I'm a high-risk parent at home. So I'm worried about her getting it as well as her bringing it home to me.
Absolutely, Pamela. Thank you for sharing. So a couple of things real quickly on that one. Obviously, that's on the mind of all of us. As I said a little bit earlier, I'm a parent, and I do know that our teachers are concerned about health and all of this. So our mitigation and prevention strategies have to be in place to try and keep everybody as safe as possible. The other option that we have in all of this is if we are able to go back face-to-face, we want to make sure that parents have the option for some kind of a virtual school environment as well. That virtual school environment, I want to say right now, just so everyone knows, has to look different than it did last spring. Those of you that participated last spring and were in Belton ISD at the time, I'm very proud of what was lifted up for our students and our staff during that short time that we had to lift something up for virtual learning. But we also know we need to learn from that, and it can't be the same. We need to make sure that students have the same rigor and the same challenge and the same interaction with teachers in a virtual environment. So that virtual option that will be there for parents this year, you will be able to enroll in. And if those health and mitigation strategies that Mr. Morgan shared a little bit earlier, and that we will publish on the 24th. If you're still worried about things, that virtual learning option is going to be an option for you as well. But I appreciate you sharing that, Pamela, because I know that that's heavy on the minds of everyone about students and their safety, staff and their safety, and parents, or in some cases, grandparents that are caregivers and their safety. Let's jump. I see another highly rated one, health of faculty. Who shared health of faculty? Will you jump in and tell me a little bit more about the health of faculty and what's on your mind about that?
Mary Drop Eberhardt, you have your hand raised for that one. I've asked you to unmute yourself if you can on that question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mary. Thank you.
God bless everybody, and I know this has been a very trying time for us all. My concern is for our teachers, our staff, our students, our community, and I'm a great grandmother raising my grandson, and I am terrified of this virus, and I'm very concerned about his education, but I want to make sure that our teachers that are so underpaid because of my having to teach school since spring break was crazy. I just want to make sure that they're safe and that we are safe and that we can have a better curriculum for our children. I know you did your best. We're all at our wits' end, but I think that we need more on hands to educate our children at home. What are your perspectives there? What are you going to do?
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate you sharing that. So yes, obviously the health of our faculty is a big deal for us. We can't educate kids without our teachers and staff, and we need to make sure that we're respecting their health in all of this. We are doing something similar with our teaching and staff members in Belton ISD and getting their feedback as well. But I'll address a little bit of the at-home learning environment, and I'm going to ask Deanna Lovesmith, our Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum, to dive in a little bit and talk a little bit about what the remote learning option or the at-home learning option might look like for some of our families moving forward.
Thank you. Yes, we definitely want you all to know that when we developed a plan in the spring, that was done in a response to a crisis, and it was a quick turnaround. And we learned a lot through that and have been working for a plan for this year. We are going to, as Matt said, we're looking at both at school and at home learning with devices that will be purchased for all of our students. We've looked at or have moved on online platforms to use to support instruction. So we recognize all of the things that happen in a classroom when you're face-to-face that are critical to learning. That face-to-face instruction with your teacher where they're providing direct instruction, direct feedback, collaboration with other students, working in groups, learning from one another. And we have found tools where we'll be able to use those in an at-home online learning environment. We have Seesaw for our K through 2, Google Classroom for 3rd through 5, Schoology and Canvas for our high school learners. We will be using digital tools, like I said, discussion boards, indirect learning, collaboration groups, all virtually to provide and mimic that experience that we have when we are seeing kids face to face. We'll be following our standard curriculum, taking grades. I know that's a big question on folks' mind. We'll have a grading policy similar for both at home and online as well, or at school, so that we can create the similar experience.
Thank you, Deanna. We're going to jump down to the next one on the thought exchange, and I see it's it's up at the top now. Procedures in place to handle any positive cases that may arise and how we will notify parents. Mr. Morgan, can you and Mr. Schiller maybe enlighten everyone on the call about what are the procedures that we currently have planned on that?
Certainly. Todd, do you want to take that one, or would you like for me to?
Yeah, I can start off and you can add to it. But we do have protocols in place for how we'll handle those situations. First of all, if a staff member reports of a confirmed case, there's 3 conditions they'll need to meet before returning back to work. And that's that 10 days must have passed since symptoms first appeared, improvement in those symptoms, and 3 days have passed with no fever and under no medication to reduce the fever. If a staff member reports COVID symptoms, those same 3 things must be met, or they can provide medical documentation from a doctor that states that their diagnosis was something that is not COVID related. Or they could also provide 2 separate types of tests, COVID tests of negative status that are 24 hours apart. We also have a situation if staff members report they're in close contact with someone that has tested positive for the virus, those individuals will be quarantined for 14 days. And these are all guidelines and recommendations from TEA and CDC that we're following with that. And we do have a process in place to notify individuals that are on campus or that are in a situation where somebody has tested positive around them. And so we do have letters and notifications that are distributed home to parents or to other staff members regarding that.
I would say also that some of the clarifying language that we have been waiting on is a more formal definition of close contact. The word close contact, social distancing, they're kind of used interchangeably. And we've been watching information from local state health officials, from CDC, and from our governing body, Texas Education Agency. And as late as last Tuesday, we actually got the first formal definition from the Texas Education Agency on close contact, where close contact was being defined as being within 6 feet for a cumulative duration of 15 minutes while not wearing a face covering, or being directly exposed to infectious secretions while not wearing a face covering. We will do contact tracing. There will be notification processes in place. We've already seen those play out to an extent this summer in some of the summer programs that we've been allowed to host in person. And those notifications go out to the parents of anyone involved and to staff members as well. And we are working through those processes, and we'll have a great deal more detail out when our plan is released. But those are all things that we've kind of been waiting on some guidance and some regulation, I guess you would say, on what the requirements are going to be and what those definitions are going to be. So we're all operating under the same protocols and the same guidelines.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Mike. Let's move on to the next one. And I see I see highly concerned about asymptomatic student or staff, inadequate precaution or safety measures. Mike, can you talk a little bit about the pre-screening that we're going to ask people to do at home with their kids and stuff? And Todd, maybe add a little bit on with staff, just so everyone knows what we're asking people to do and be partners with us in this effort.
Sure. And I think that's a great question. And I think that's one of the things that makes this a really complicated problem, right, is asymptomatic. And depending on which study you look at and where your source is, there's a likelihood that there are going to be asymptomatic people around. We're going to have expectations that everyone keeps open eyes, open ears, that we can, I mean, the best screening tool we can use may or may not catch an asymptomatic person. If they don't have fever, if they don't have symptoms, which is the definition of asymptomatic, it is going to be a little bit more difficult. But we will have screeners in place. We're going to ask parents to obviously self-screen students at home and not send kids to school if they are exhibiting any symptoms or signs. We are going to do some screening, use screening tools for staff. We're going to have our nurses and our teachers will have tools. And we're not going to go into all of the details right now, but we're going to screen the best we can. And asymptomatic is an issue, as we all know it is, and it is a concern.
Well, I would just add for the staff, we are going to ask for them to do some self-screening at home before they come into work. And I will also add that we're going to train all staff of the things to watch for, and to be able to report immediately to the correct people. So when we have somebody that sees somebody with symptoms, that those people get reported immediately, and we can kind of isolate the situation and make sure any potential virus doesn't spread.
I think the only other thing that I'll add on that is one of the things that we need is family partners in this. And so if you know that your child or a relative or somebody that works in the school system has been exposed, we need to make sure that we're not sending them to the school at that point. And we've got to work through the appropriate health protocols for that, because you hit it on the head. Asymptomatic is really hard. And the only thing that is going to help us in all of that is if we work together as a community to make sure, if we know there's a potential for people to be exposed, that we try and make sure that we're following the guidance that is issued about getting the test, the COVID test, knowing whether or not they've tested positive, staying isolated for a certain amount of days if they haven't had the test, because that's the only way we can ensure that there's not asymptomatic people spreading it. So that'll have to be a partnership piece that's highly concerning for all of us, just being real honest. Let's take a look at the next one if we could here. Number of students, children in the classroom, high risk of exposure, the more students that are present. If you shared that, will you expand a little bit more and what your thoughts are on this?
I see a Katrina Scott. If you could unmute yourself.
Hi.
Hi, Katrina, thank you.
Hi. So I actually worded mine different. I just realized someone else might raise their hand here because mine's actually worded differently, but it's the same thing.
Okay.
And I think a lot of us are realizing like the big deal here is like the amount of kids that are around each other. And so is there anything else you guys have looked at that would just lower the number of children in the classroom? Because the way I see it, like if kids are wearing masks in the hallways and in the large groups, then maybe if we only had 12 kids in the classroom, they didn't need to have their masks on then or at recess. And I feel like we would kind of address the problems that are coming from each end. There's a lot of people that don't want their kids to wear masks. There's others that, I have someone immunocompromised in my family. I really want him to be able to go to school. So I don't think it's fair to just say, okay, if you're scared, keep your kid home. I want my kid to have a face-to-face learning experience. Is a hybrid approach something that has even been considered, where maybe some kids can go 5 days a week, but some of us can choose to do 2? I think because that would cut your classroom size in half. I know several districts that are doing something like that.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Katrina. That's one of those things, as I mentioned at the beginning, that we are working and planning through all of those scenarios. We do have some ideas for a hybrid approach. And the goal in all of that, just for those of you that aren't familiar, the goal would be to ensure that you're reducing the number of kids that your student might be exposed to at any one given time. Obviously, there are a lot of logistics to work out about that, because you have to have the right number of staff to make that happen for a virtual learning environment and in a face-to-face learning environment. But we're working through those planning process pieces, and that's, in all honesty, one of the key decisions that we probably have to make this week is given the new TEA guidance that was issued on Friday and the ability for us to consider that now, is that something that we want to pursue? Again, I hear loud and clear from parents and community members that there is no substitution for face-to-face instruction for our kids. I'm a teacher at heart. I believe that fully. I was a high school English teacher. But I also know that in this era, in this time, in this pandemic, we need to make sure that we have options available for our families. And so those options hopefully will include a plan that allows face-to-face instruction and allows families to feel pretty secure about the security and safety procedures that are in place. And then the second piece is obviously that online learning environment as well. But there very well may be a hybrid option that we consider here in Belton ISD as our final plan. Thank you, Katrina. We appreciate that. Let's look at the next one if we could. I think we've talked a little bit about the, Oh, that changed on me kind of quick. Sorry about that. We've talked about the procedures. We've talked about the asymptomatic. We've talked about the response to positive cases. Parents knowingly sending sick kids to school. This is one of the most important messages we need to get out to our community right now. The time where we used to send students to school, if they were sick or not, we need to make sure that our families are following those screening protocols and trying to make sure that our students are staying home if they feel ill and our staff is staying home if they feel ill. Will there be screening of symptoms prior to school and riding the bus? Mr. Morgan, do you want to add a little bit on where we are right now in the planning process on that?
Yes, we absolutely have some tools that we can use for bus capacity. We're gathering data at this time. One of the questions in the parent survey that we sent out was, if you are eligible for transportation services, do you intend to use those services when you return to school? And so we're currently building out plans where we could anticipate, or we could provide transportation services from a minimal amount, as little as 13 students on a bus, to a full capacity plan. We just have to all understand that with each one of those models that we've come up with, there's consequences. So if you were to go to a very minimal capacity model for your transportation services, let's say we went to a 13 at a time bus, it would take a lot longer to get all of those students to school. So we would have to alter the school schedule, and we might have to alter start and end times to make that happen. Wherever, if we were in a max capacity model like we run currently, it would take a certain amount of time, and we wouldn't have to adjust those start and end times. So when we talk about capacity on buses, when we talk about capacity in our cafeterias and common areas, we definitely have tools that we're going to use and we can use to mitigate those capacity concerns and try to keep the close contact at the greatest distance we can, but just realizing that those have consequences with staggered start and end times. And we really won't be able to formalize that until we get a really good idea of how many students actually do intend to ride the bus to and from school every day.
Thank you, Mike. So we'll jump into the last one or so here before we wrap up today. We've talked a little bit about screening process. Let's talk about the online plan. Let's be robust enough for my kid to actually learn. The materials in March were not, through May were not good enough. So Dr. Lovesmith has addressed this a little bit. Deanna, anything else that you want to add on this topic for us?
I just want to reiterate that we've been planning, and the plan will not look like what it did in the spring. That was planned out of crisis, and this is a different response we're taking. We'll mirror a school day to the best that we can. We are providing devices, and we'll have the online platforms. And so definitely, we agree with you. It will be more robust.
Thank you. One of the things that came up in the earlier thought exchange that we did with parents today was the idea of grades. And I don't see that here, but I want to make sure that we address that real quickly. No, we did not have grades when we were all closed. It was just a pass-fail type system in the spring. For the fall, we will have grades, and we do have to work through how that works. But the idea is that we're going to have an exceptional learning experience for each and every kid in our system, whether they're face-to-face or virtual, because we know throughout the year that we are going to be in various scenarios most likely. And so our job is to make sure that that rigorous learning experience along with grades is available to every student, no matter what the venue that they're learning in. Last one, let's see, the ability to maintain social distancing in crowded hallways and common areas at Belton High School. So I'll just mention that one real quickly. That's what we've been planning through with our hybrid type approach. And that was one of the reasons why we would experience a hybrid type approach, is because we would want to limit the number of students out in the hallways and stuff. Obviously, when you have, in Belton High School's case, I imagine it'll be about 2,400 kids or so over the next year. That's a challenge for us. And so we are considering doing phased in approaches beginning in August, or possibly hybrid approaches, so that we can limit the amount of students that are there during the day. It might even include things like staggered passing time, so not everybody is actually face-to-face in the hallways at the same time like they have been in the past. So we appreciate that comment as well. I'm going to wrap us up today as we're finishing up. A couple of things just to go back to purpose of all of this today. Purpose was to engage you all as thought partners and to gather your ideas in a thought exchange and your feedback in a thought exchange about the most important safety measures that we have to consider as we're making this final determination and publishing things over the week. Again, this isn't a Q&A time where we would have had answers to all of we have 270 some, I believe, on the call, where we would have answered 270 individual questions. This was about engaging people in the input and feedback phase. We will try and make sure that we get that plan published on Friday. As you all know, as I mentioned at the beginning of this call, we are subject to having things change rather rapidly. TEA's guidance changed from Wednesday when we presented last week until Friday, and it could change again. Bell County Health Authority could change the guidance that they issued to us. The governor could change executive orders, et cetera. And so we will do our best to keep you updated about the guidance that we receive as Belton ISD, and we will get a plan out to you. Hopefully on the 24th is our timeline indicated earlier today. I appreciate you all being thought partners in this. I know that not every district approaches things this way, but I think that that's part of the reason that Belton ISD is special, is because we realize it's our job to create exceptional learning experiences for each of the 12,200 students in our school system. And the best way that we can do that is to engage many minds and many thoughts to make our plan stronger and better for our kids. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate your thoughts and your ability to weigh in. We're going to use your data as we finalize this plan, and hopefully we'll do our best to make sure each and every kid is safe and thriving this fall. Thanks for your time today. Bye-bye, everybody.